Welcome back to the Preacher Voice podcast. On August 30th, 2022, a former Sunday school teacher has been sentenced to 87 years in prison for abusing and sexually assaulting at least 3 young girls, both at his church and on church-owned and operated buses. Jonathan Young was a member and Sunday school teacher at Firstborn Baptist Church, the home of Gateway Christian School. The ministry has been described as, quote, dark and cult-like by at least 7 former members who spoke to WRAL News in 2018 when Young was initially arrested on 13 charges of sexually abusing children. WRAL News reported, quote, "There's this culture of fear and you have to obey the ultimate leader and authority," said Cherith Robertson, 32, a former church member. And it starts from the beginning. Her family joined when she was 7 years old, and she said that it was taught that it's necessary to break a child's spirit by any means necessary. Her little sister at the time was just 5 years old. She said, "I know it's not normal, but at the time I didn't know what normal was. They all attended school at the church. They were told what to wear, what to believe, and were not allowed contact with anyone on the outside. And there were serious consequences for breaking rules. She alleged that they would put her in a closet with a light out and would sit there all day. She was allowed to eat just one time. And there was a lot of physical and emotional abuse alleged that went way beyond spanking, from spanking to beating, and there was a huge paddle in the church school that she attended." The article reveals a lot more, and I'll link to that in the show notes of this episode, but I want to talk about the case for which he was actually sentenced. So, as horrible as the church allegedly was on the surface, what was happening behind the scenes at Firstborn Baptist Church is actually far more disturbing. Jonathan Young, a former Sunday school teacher, sexually molested at least 3 minors. One testified that the abuse started when she was just 9 years old and continued until she was 11. The second victim testified that Young abused her during the summer of 2003 when she was 9 years old as well. She said that he would take her for rides on 4-wheelers and abuse her, and would also abuse her during times where they would be playing hide and seek with her family. Some former church members have since said that leaders knew of the abuse, but the leadership denies knowing what was happening. Surprise, surprise. WRAL reported that on August 30th, 2022, a jury found Jonathan Young, 38, of Benson, guilty on multiple counts of rape, sexual offense, and indecent liberties with children. He would be 125 years old when this sentence ends. One of his victims, who's now an adult, shared her story. Now, this article shares her name, and they received permission from the victim who wanted to share her story publicly to help others.
The victim I spoke to was in the courtroom when Young was sentenced yesterday. I asked her if she could say anything to him, what would it be?
I do not forgive him. I do not owe him anything. He owes me everything. He took my entire childhood and most of my teenage years away from me. He owes me all of that. I know I'll never get it. And that I hope he dies in prison.
This brave woman's name is Brianna Holland, and she shares her story in this article. It says, Holland went to Firstborn Baptist Church in Benson every Sunday growing up, and for 2 years, starting when she was just 9 years old, a man she looked up to was inappropriately touching her. She kept the secret for years. I was confused and very scared, she says. Church and Sunday school should have been a safe haven, but 2 other children were also abused between 2003 and 2014, the youngest victim being just 7 years old. She said, on the Sunday school bus, he would just initially rub my leg. The abuse grew worse over time. It was kissing, rubbing, grinding, things like that in the basement, she says. He made multiple threats. Quote, if you tell anyone, I'll hurt you. I'll hurt your family. 4 years after the abuse occurred, she got the courage to speak up. That was 2017. 1 year later, Young was arrested, 2018, and charged with sex crimes against 3 girls at the church, including Brianna Holland's sister. It was hard and traumatizing, she says. I haven't seen him since he was first arrested. During the trial, Holland sat across from Young for 2 weeks, testifying in the case. His sentence of 87 years is long enough that he should never experience life outside of prison again. She said, I was very happy, very content with what he got. Holland's now 19 and shared her story of sexual abuse with WRAL News in hopes it will help other victims. It's a really tragic and horrible story, and the church leaders did respond initially when the charges were made but I haven't responded since sentencing. It says that Pastor Durwood Young, who currently is the pastor of Firstborn Baptist Church, said he's heartbroken by it all because it's unbelievable. I hate it, and I don't know what else to say about it. Durwood Young said he first heard about the allegations in 2014 from the sheriff's office, but no charges were filed at that time. The investigation was dropped as far as I know, Durwood Young said. That's the way I understand it. Durwood Young is Jonathan Young's great uncle, and he called him a model employee. I think you could go out in the community and find people who were absolutely devastated, Durwood Young said. WRAL News did reach out to Durwood Young on Tuesday after the sentence was passed, but he didn't return calls. I love this last statement from the DA's office, and I'll close out this section here.
A jury sentenced him yesterday to a minimum of 87 years in prison. Johnston County DA's office stating, quote, "Thankfully, this sexual predator will never be able to harm another child. The Johnston County DA's office will continue to aggressively pursue justice to those who prey upon children in our community."
Very content with what he got.
Holland is now 19 and sharing her story of sexual abuse with WRAL in hopes it will help other victims of sexual crimes. She encourages those holding on to pain to speak up.
At the end of the day, it is worth it. You learn how to fight through the scary feelings.
I'm really glad to see that Jonathan Young is going to be getting such a severe penalty, and I'm glad that this WRAL News is raising awareness about this. They've been reporting on this since the arrest initially happened. And of course, I'm incredibly thankful to the DA for pursuing this and pushing for a maximum possible sentence under the law and doing such a hard work in pursuing this case. But ultimately, the victims who came forward are incredibly brave, and I'm extremely proud of each of them for coming forward. Brianna Holland sharing her story with so many outlets. It's really raising awareness to this, and I think it's important, again, that we keep talking about these stories. This is stuff that's happening not just in the 80s and 90s. This is happening year after year in these churches all across America. These churches that should be safe havens, these schools that should be safe havens, they're not being that. They're safe havens for predators, for criminals. And it's incredibly disturbing how many of these stories are coming up on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. So I'm so thankful for those who are shedding light on it. And again, I'm thankful for the DA's office for pursuing this case and for the victims, including Brianna, who have shared their stories so bravely and brought this man to justice. Again, if you are in any way affiliated with Firstborn Baptist Church, if you were attending during this time period, talk to your kids, talk to people about this story. It's very rare that there's only a handful of victims. There's usually more. And so I think it's important to know if you were there during that time, if you were in the bus ministry, if you're in the Sunday school, talk to your kids, find out what their experience was like, ask good questions, and hopefully if there's any further information relating to this case, it can go to the right people and we can see justice carried out. But thank you so much for listening to this episode. I want to give this quick update on this story and let you know what was happening here. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.